Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Neonit, the last day of the Fashionsustain.Conference and the trade show and everything else here. Lovely to see you. We'll wait for the last people to gather more to the front. So, welcome to our first panel of this day, Global Value Chains. Do we need global laws? We have some strong initiatives here at the moment in Germany about transparency in global supply chains, and that's kind of the base of our discussion now. And then one aspect is obviously always when we talk about global supply chain transparency, the question is how far do we get with national approaches, and how much do we need global approaches, and how can that be combined? Unfortunately, I have to say Kristin Heckmann of Hessnatur is ill, and we had a last-minute dropout of Lucrezia. So we have a smaller panel, but nevertheless a very, very well informed panel. So first of all, I'd love to welcome to the stage Lisa Jasper. Am I seeing her? Oh yes, there. So she's the initiator of Fair by Law, and that is kind of a massive side project besides you being the owner and founder of Folkdays, which you can let us know a little bit more about in a moment. Then I'd love to bring to the stage Maren Leifker of Brot für die Welt and Anosha Wahidi from the BMZ. Please find a place. Welcome. Let's start this discussion with really the most concrete aspect of it. I mean, I don't know if you've been at a trade show the last 2 days, you might have seen people running around with T-shirts saying fair by law. And I don't know, some of you know about it, some of you probably don't yet. Maybe, Lisa, you can kind of introduce us a little bit to the topic in general. You started this campaign and petition. What is it about?
As you said earlier, I'm not a politician, I'm an entrepreneur, and I founded a fair fashion label, so I was invited to attending a lot of fair fashion events lately over the last 5 years, and I thought that a lot of the discussions that I was part of always circled around the same questions. How can we make companies move into a better direction, be more responsible? How can we convince consumers that it matters what they buy? And being a political scientist as a background, I was always like, okay, this is interesting, but nobody talks about politics. So 1.5 years ago, when Rana Plaza happened exactly 5 years before, I thought, okay, maybe let's try to influence the public discourse on these issues, especially in our bubble, because I think people are really open to new ideas. So I was actually in a conversation with Max, I think, where he told me that, and that's probably an old number, that the organic food market in Germany is not more than like 8% or so. And back then I thought, oh my gosh, if it took 25 years to get to 8% in the organic food market, how long is it going to take for the textile market to change at least a little bit? And then I was like, okay, how can it go faster? And of course, if there's a law, then everybody has to move faster. So I introduced the campaign, and it was really kind of put together in 4 days. Nice, but really kind of amateur video and all of that. So I'd kind of tried to kick it off as fast as possible. And it just had so much resonance that I was like, okay, this is really a topic that the public can get behind. Last year we started a 2nd edition, and we took some cool people on board that are in the fashion scene, the fashion changers and some other people who are really supportive of the issue. And we were like, okay, let's try to make this a really big campaign. So we kind of came up with the hashtag Fair by Law and tried to spread it. We got influencers on board and tried to create a movement around it. So this is a little bit what happened. And we had 150,000 signatures that we managed to hand over last month to one of the ministries that is responsible for passing a law like that. So I would say it has been super, super crazily cool. We're here at the fair because Hessnatur, one of the oldest German sustainable companies, actually said, okay, we want to support this too. So there's a little video booth if any of you wants to be part of our new video in the fair, and the fair is actually also supporting us in this message. So I think by companies getting behind this issue, we can really make a change, because they can actually say, okay, you know, all these arguments that comes from other companies is actually bullshit, and there are so many ways to be responsible for what we do in our value chains. Blah, blah.
Well, we'll discuss that a bit further. Maren, you don't come from the fashion background, so you're kind of a bit of an alien here in this round, but a very welcome one, obviously, because I strongly believe like all the solutions for the future are not lying within the bubbles we are, but we have to cross cooperate. So why is this kind of this question of transparency and of due diligence for you so important from your perspective?
So I mean, I come from a development organization, as you might know, Brot für die Welt, and we have many partner organizations all over the world, and many of these organizations work with affected communities who really see the consequences of mining, but also modern types of slavery, working conditions, and all these negative effects. And so in some of the cases, we would try to actually have a dialogue with the companies in Germany and try to convince them to better the human rights situation in the regions where they're active or where their suppliers are based. And we really made the experience over years, as many other NGOs in Germany, that there's not happening enough on a voluntary basis, and also voluntary measures and standards are not legally enforceable, so it doesn't give the victims the possibility to have access to justice, for instance, before a court in Germany, and simply to file a claim if their human rights are violated. So this is kind of the background of many of the organizations who are with Bread for the World. In this campaign that started in September last year. It's called Initiative Lieferketten, Gesetz. So yeah, basically in English, a supply chain law initiative. And by now we are an alliance of more than 80 civil society organizations in Germany, from different kind of sectors like development organizations, but also environmental organizations and trade unions. And kind of the background for this campaign is also that many of the organizations were lobbying for mandatory human rights due diligence or for supply chain law in Germany for a long time, and we really realized, okay, we have to join our forces in form of such a campaign to have a political impact. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Well, now that was a perfect bridging, because Lisa already mentioned the politics as a motivator at the beginning, and now you at the end. So here we are sitting with one arm of the politics, let's say. So obviously you've been quite busy lately with something a little bit else, but not too far from this topic, the green button, or in German grüner Knopf. But I know you also have strong opinions, and you're quite interested in this topic of creating actually also a law that would bring maybe another drive to this whole topic. So yeah, what's your view currently from the political side on this topic?
Yes, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. My name is Anosha Wahidi, and I'm working for the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And you might wonder, what is a development actor doing here on this panel? And I think this is the basic question. Like all the human rights violations that you're actually talking about, which are very true and very visible, happen usually in developing countries in a massive way. So for us as a development actor, having binding regulation is mandatory. It's actually the basis for each and every action that we're actually engaging with, because what we learned in the past, we tried many different instruments which were not mandatory. We founded the Textiles Partnership, for instance, in 2014, which is a multi-stakeholder initiative which should enable businesses especially to comply with their due diligence. We came up with Siegelklarheit, which should give more orientation for consumers when they're buying, when when they're buying sustainable goods and stuff. And we have many other initiatives with fair trade and especially with companies in developing countries. And we have instruments for businesses that we set up in order to assist and help businesses to comply with their due diligence. But what we also learned, and that's a lessons learned from the past, is that voluntary measures have certain limitations, and that's what we learned in the past. And the main learning is we need sort of a legal framework which enables everyone to first understand, get an orientation on what is actually expected from them, what does politics expect from businesses, and on the other hand, orientation for the consumers. That's why we came up, you already mentioned that, last year with the launch of the Grüner Knopf, which is state-owned and for the textile sector, and should give consumers orientation in that regard. But in a nutshell, to put it in a nutshell, what we need is a basis for everyone to create a level playing field, especially for companies and businesses. They come to us and ask for this sort of orientation from politics, because being sustainable for a business so far is not really an advantage. So what we should create as a political actor is to give an orientation on the basic level, and on the other hand, this is something that I would like to make clear today as well. A law alone won't help us in the long run. A law can give orientation and can sort of regulate a minimum standard, but we need to reach even more further than that. That's why we are firm believers that besides a law, we need a smart mix of measures. That's what Professor Ruggie with the UN Guiding Principles actually came up with, is that we also support businesses on their path to being a more sustainable company. And what does due diligence mean? So that's why we will definitely continue with our engagement with the Textiles Partnership and other multi-stakeholder initiatives. And we will also support fair trade initiatives. But, and this is, I always compare it with a puzzle. Everyone here in the room actually did a puzzle. So what you definitely need is each and every piece of a puzzle. And if one piece is missing, like a law or a multi-stakeholder initiative or any other instrument that we're providing, the picture is not perfect. And this is what we're actually going for. We would like to, fulfill the picture and make it perfect by having a binding regulation on the one hand, but also other measures that help businesses on the one hand, and on the other hand, help consumers getting a better orientation. We started with the Grüner Knopf or green button in the textile sector because we see that the textiles industry is one of the most polluting industries worldwide. I think it's the second or the third polluting industry worldwide. So the need for more orientation in that regard, from our point of view, is even more visible to the consumers. That's why we started with the green button. In a nutshell, I think my buzzword is always smart mix. I think it's really important to understand that a law alone, without any other supporting initiatives, measures, won't help the workers in Bangladesh and elsewhere to get their living wages, to have the ability to engage in civil society actions, in order and to help them to live from their earnings. I think. I hope that we all have the same understanding of, you see it in Germany as well, and Europe and elsewhere. A law alone will not help us in that regard. So we need a law, definitely, and we struggle for that. And my minister is very known for his initiative and the will to initiate that and to bring that further. And that's the second main issue that I would like to raise today is as long as we don't have accompanying measures, the effects won't be the ones that we're actually looking for.
Right, that was a lot of input. And in that sense, it was also maybe already a smart mix of different aspects. Right, so kind of, it sounds a bit, you started with the softer measurements and now you're completing the mix. So From my perspective, what I read about in the last few months, it sounds like nearly everybody is now in line. Everybody is in favor of such a law. I mean, we just had the news, the CEO of Primark is in favor and says like, yeah, this would help us. So we actually get a framework. So I guess that obstacle is out of the way. It's not really the question if yes or no. At least in Germany, we seem to be quite well agreeing to let's have this law. So what's our next steps? I mean, Maren, like you also representing a lot of different civil society initiatives. What do you think? What will be the next steps? We have like 2 petitions. We have like a strong public vote there, which probably the pressure will be held on in the next few months. How do we actually go into this kind of law? Do you think there will be very different approaches to how this law may look like?
Yeah, I think the next step that has to come now, and it's a really critical one, is actually the legal debate about how such a law should look like and how a law should be designed to really change something on the ground, to change like the living conditions of workers, employers, people affected by mine sites or infrastructure projects, for instance. And I mean, there's really a risk because I think we're somehow in our bubble all thinking, of course, that's important and I want to buy fair and we need regulation. We live in a rule of law country, of course. We need laws for that require companies to human rights due diligence. But on the other side, there's like a huge resistance for a really long time by big business associations on national level as well as on international level who are completely against any kind of new binding regulation for companies and who of course have a really strong influence and I think it's like at the moment it's quite sure in Germany that we will have this political debate about a supply chain law and I mean it's gonna happen in the next year and so the business associations in Germany won't be able to stop this debate and there I see the risk is they will try to water it down. So, for instance, what we think is important also to better the access to justice for affected communities is that you have legal liability of companies, that they actually have to pay if they violate human rights abroad. And so this is, for instance, something where there's a risk that the influence of business associations will try to, that we in the end have something like a tick-the-box exam for companies or maybe a new reporting duty or something like this, something really weak that won't change anything on the ground.
Right. Lisa, you know supply chains also quite well for yourself. What would you say, what is the most important cornerstones of such a law? Well, you know, you're asking for it, but where should we really say and be strict? Okay, if this doesn't come in a law, it wouldn't be effectful anyway.
Well, I would say we even have to go one step back and say who are the actors that actually are blocking the law at the moment. And I think it's really important to call those out because what has been shown through the work of civil society, you published with a couple of other NGOs a report that actually more or less proves that the Ministry of Economics, which is at the moment blocking any attempt to pass a law, or the Bundeskanzleramt, meaning the Ministry of the Chancellor, I don't know how to translate that, they are the 2 actors that are very, very powerful in the political mix, and they are trying to block this law. So, and we all say, okay, it doesn't make so much sense because, of course, we think that companies should be responsible for what happens in their value chains, but they're actually really, really powerful political actors that are not acting in that way and that lean too much towards the industry and actually will try to do their best to water down this law. So I think what I was trying to do, or what we were trying to do with getting civil society and the public on board, is to pay very close attention of what's happening and to not just take it as given that the industry has a lot of influence on politics. I think that's something that we sometimes just accept, but it's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the politics is in the best interest of people, and that does not only mean us, but also other people on the other end of the world. So I think there's still a long way to go, because two of the most powerful political players are blocking this, and they are still trying to buy time by saying, well, we don't know yet if the things that we initiated that are not legally binding actually worked. And everybody knows on the inside they didn't work at all. But we're still losing time and time and time. And I think this is also why I'm super happy that we get to push this topic even further, and that we're here and that we're collecting more voices, because in the end of the day, if we're losing another half a year, if we're losing another year, and I know that legal processes take long time, but this actually costs people's lives. So I think just for politicians to be that confident and saying, okay, you know, let's do the political process by the book, I think that's something that has to be addressed, because this means that there are a lot of things happening in developing countries that could have been avoided if we would have moved faster. And everybody knew it, I would say 2 or 3 years ago already, that we need a law. Other topic, did not answer your question, but I think that's really important to keep the pressure up at that point.
Well, in a way, it kind of indirectly kind of answers it, because, well, the reasons for these players to block it are probably the ones that should be fixed in the law. So you quite easily find the weak or the spots there.
Can I just reply to that?
I want to refer to you anyway, obviously. So, like, obviously, lawmaking processes, in general, also political agendas, it's not normally the quickest process, which also has its positive sides, because we've seen in history quick political changes are not always welcome. We have no control then also. But yeah, we live in a time where it feels we have quite some urgency around us. And I think the last half year, much bigger part of the public has woken up to this. I mean, not to the last two lady that we all call Greta. But how can we deal with this ambivalence that on the one hand there's this urgency and there's a lot of clarity on like where is really the things we have to move on, and everybody would agree, and still we have systems, economic systems, political systems running around us that seem to be not ready for this kind of different dynamic and also the global aspect to it. So what is your first kind of next step from your position? Like, you are obviously an expert in this area. How can we get to the law now, and how do we overcome the blocking?
Exactly. Thank you very much. And Max, allow me to first maybe clarify something for the audience as well, the processes that will conduct in order to get a law. And I'm here as a representative of the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. That's one view, and we're strong advocates for regulation. But as Lisa already mentioned, there are also other actors within the German government that might have different interests. So that's why we actually, within the German government, we are working on the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. And I think this is what you were actually referring to. And what we actually decided 2 years ago is to say, well, before we decide on, and I'm a lawyer myself, there is always the question, if a law, and if the if is answered with yes, you get to the how to get there. So still within the German government, we're on the first stage. If, shall we have a law, yes or no? That's why we came up with the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights 2 years ago, and we decided to conduct 2 surveys amongst businesses with more than 500 employees, just to cover what you were actually referring to, Lisa. How is the status quo of due diligence within German companies in Germany? And the results of the first survey just came out a month ago. And for us, for me, it was not very surprising, to be honest. But it was very frustrating, the result. We're talking about Germany, one of the most important countries and the richest countries. And only less than 20% of the German companies or businesses that took part in the survey actually comply with their due diligence. shame on us, we could say.
That's shocking.
It is actually. And it's, for a lot of people it was surprising, but if you're working in that area, it's not that surprising. And just give me the chance to explain that a bit, why we came up with that result. The two surveys actually have stand under the umbrella. If less than 50% of the German companies comply with their due diligence in the year of 2020, then the German government will come up with a national legislation. This is binding for the German government as well. And we will also look into EU legislation. This is actually the stage where we are right now. My minister was very clear in December, and he came up with Minister Heil, who is the Minister of Social Affairs, Labor and Social Affairs in Germany. My minister doesn't need a second survey. He was very clear. He said this is a sign that we have to act, politics have to act and serve some answers. But of course, we will wait what the second survey will come up with results. And to be honest, I don't expect even better results than this, because what the survey shows us is that a lot of companies don't even know what the risk analysis is, and they never conducted a risk analysis, and maybe they don't even see the need for one. But nevertheless, what we did, and that's what we will also present in less than 1 month, we will work on a law. We will draft a law, and we will present, we call it Eckpunkte, like the basis for a law. And this will also include, from our point of view, not only social aspects, but also environmental aspects. Because I think there is no way, no planet to see without the environmental impact that people have on the environment. So social aspects are as important as the environmental aspects. And we will definitely also try to regulate or give ideas on how to incentivize those companies who are actually better than their due diligence compliance. Because what I think, and this is the role of politics, is on the one hand to give orientation for all actors, on the other hand support those who are on their way there but still not reaching the point. And the third one, and these are the 3 points that I'm always referring to, is incentivize also those who are maybe in the Ivy League of businesses, and we have those examples as well. And let me be very frank on that. I don't know Folkdays, but I know a lot of businesses who are very, very sustainable, and sort of you should take part in the Green Button Initiative then. And this is something that I would like to stress once more here. We are firm believers that this regulation needs a balanced approach. We need the basis standards, and we take the UN guiding principles and the OECD guidances that give us sort of the cornerstone of this law. And above that, we would like to incentivize those companies who are already complying with their due diligence. And the third one is also, we have to look on our public procurement as well. Because we can not only expect businesses to comply with due diligence, we as German government are also in the role to comply with our due diligence when it comes to public procurement.
I think it's always a good idea to be a role model when you ask for things. Yeah, that's definitely helpful.
And one last sentence for the audience of interest, because you were asking for the process. We will, our minister and Minister Heil, both ministers, and maybe one more, we will see, will present these, it's not a draft law, it's just, the basis of a law, what should a law include, in less than a month from now.
But okay, that's coming from the minister side. So will that be open for public comments and so?
Sure, more than welcome. I mean, they will present it, so they will make it public as they did a month ago. When we had the press conference after the results of the first survey of the National Action Plan came out, and both ministers came out and said it's time to act, and we cannot wait till the second survey and the results of the second survey, which will come, inshallah, mid of this year, but you never know, maybe end of the year, if other ministries have many questions to be answered first. We do see the need of a law, and we do see the need of the law on a timely basis. Because we have our EU presidency, the German EU presidency, mid of this year, and sustainable supply chains will play a very important role there, and of course legislation as well.
And I hear actually on the EU level, some of the stakeholders are finding quite clear words towards the industry also, what they have to expect in the next few years. I think there's really an awakening. But still I wonder, like, there's still this contradiction between, okay, the slow processes and this at least strong feeling, and I think there some facts are supporting that, of urgency. Lisa, how does it feel for you? Like, how quickly would you like to have the process? And but then if you look realistically also, like, what do you expect in the next few months? And then also, like, how can we all support this? Because then, well, we can comment obviously, but the question is, like, who will actually have a say in what is in the law, and how can we make sure it is as smart as possible?
Well, I think we have to have a very close public eye on it. We have experts here, and there are a lot of experts in civil society, as well as probably in your, I'm sure in your ministry, that that know how a good law should look like. So now we have to, kind of watch very closely. I think I always myself struggle with the question: how can you move faster in terms of political change? I guess one of the reasons why I felt I'm a very impatient person, as you might know. And one of the reasons why I started Fair by Law was that impatience, because I was like, well, I mean, there are a lot of people who think that it's necessary to do a law, but we have to speed this process up, and we need pressure for that. So I think our role as civil society, our role as consumers needs to be really, really on top of things and watch this process and really challenge what the politicians are trying to sell us as something that is more sustainable. So I think we have to really keep that buzz up and maybe even make it bigger. So a lot of people always ask me, like, why do you continue? Because you have already handed it over to the ministry. I think now the pressure begins, because now we have to, I think now the time is on our side. I think there are a lot of political actors who are on our side, but now we have to make sure that something happens that actually makes sense. And I think this is the reason why we have to, if we thought that we have to create pressure, now is the time to actually, be on top of things and create even more alliances with people that might take this into a broader society, because we are still in a very small bubble. I think this is really, really relevant now, to be really open and very critical and very focused on calling those people out that try to feed us something that is not very forward moving, and to actually, I mean, I think one of the reasons we actually were at a Parlamentarischer Abend, and one of the professors who was there, Mrs. Lorenz, said that it's crazy. Like 1.5 years ago, she was at a panel, and it seemed like a law would never come, And she's like, it's crazy. The public discourse has shifted so much, and I'm sure that there are other reasons beside our petitions, but I do think that we did play a certain part in it. For journalists picking it up, and of course a lot of private people just sharing it and being like, okay, this sounds really reasonable. So I think there is a momentum that we can use now to actually create something that will last and make a difference. But it's a very tricky process, so we better be careful not to be happy too soon, and kind of lean back and relax a little. I think now we have to put the pressure on.
Right, so after successful campaigning comes the even stronger, more successful campaigning. How do you see that? I mean, you're also coming from a background where, like, Brot for the Welt itself is like a very, let's say, old school player already, a long time around, and a lot of the other members in your initiative probably as well. How do you deal with this problem of, like, okay, we want it now, but we know the process is like more complex? Would you follow Lisa's kind of approach? Okay, now we need to keep a very strong public eye on it, and if so, how can we strengthen that even more?
Yeah, I definitely agree that we really need a strong critical public eye on the whole process at the moment, because from all, even like from the feeling from us as a campaign, actually the process is quite fast already, because like as you said, I think 1 year ago many of the organizations didn't expect how come we would far like from the political process, but also from public support, media representation. It really gained strong momentum, but also that with the Alliance for Supply Chain Law, we are now like a broad alliance of more than 80 civil society organizations. Yeah, also gained many signatories for our petition for supply chain law. And I think sometimes we even have the feeling, okay, maybe it's actually a bit too fast right now, because obviously what we also do not want is to have a law that's passed really fast against any support, against any criticism from conservative parts of the government, like the Ministry for Economics, but that it's actually weak. So no one wants like weak law that goes through very easy and is passed really fast. So, and I would also agree that we also have a group of lawyers working on or actually already published Eckpunkte or a basis for a law where we would say, okay, this has to be in it definitely to change something, and this is something we want to see in an ambitious law. And I can only say that we are obviously, of course, there to comment on what you're going to publish and to give advice. And also, we think that this is really important. And what I think is also important, because, I don't know, maybe yourself are asking what you can do to support, I think that we have such a strong momentum right now is also due to critical consumers and people really caring about what they wear, what they buy, and asking questions. And by that, putting pressure on companies to also change their business procedure. And I think through this change now, there are also more companies, like we, through the Business and Human Rights Resource Center in December, published a statement that was actually signed, or it's now signed by more than 50 companies in Germany, asking for mandatory human rights due diligence. And I think this is really something, and this is also due to critical consumers. So everybody can do something in this field, sign the petition, but also through their buying or procurement decisions.
Or talking to your friends and family about it, because I think outside of my bubble, I realize sometimes that I'm losing a lot of people. So I think to really convince others of the necessity, I think this is also something that we can do.
Well, I think in general, I mean, we are living in times where like there's a lot of separation in societies, and at the same time we're finding kind of new ways or how consumers or in general citizens are engaging. Some of them quite loudly, and we can also see, for example, with Fridays for Future, which was a very general kind of movement, and now is starting to become way more focused. And just saw them targeting Siemens for some good reasons. So I guess, I mean, that's an interesting time anyway. Yeah? We kind of redefining also processes in a way, because, well, for many years there was not such a big public kind of outcry on like, hey, why is this like this? And I feel that's definitely changing now. So that goes a bit to you again. Like, how do you feel like the difference now? Is it becoming easier also your job to kind of to because you have like more people who are calling for similar approaches at least, and then obviously we still have to find compromises, which is always an annoying process, but it is what politics is all about. Do you feel like a good support in the last few 2-3 years? Is there a change for your job?
Well, I'm doing that now for more than 5 years. I'm working in that division, which is, by the way, a unit since December, so it's getting bigger because the visibility of the whole subject, sustainability and sustainable supply chains, obviously raises. And but I would like to pick up a point that Lisa already mentioned, the bubble. I mean, we are here like-minded, and these are all people very aware of the subject, very aware of what we actually need in order to create a fair globalization. At the end of the day, it's we talk about globalization. The globalized world is actually, we shouldn't live on the expense of other people, and this is what is actually happening right now. But on the other hand, as I said earlier, a law alone and pointing with your accusing finger at others won't help us. So everyone in this room is actually asked, if you're posing me that question, if we don't change our awareness, our way of living, our way of consuming, nothing will change. And of course, a law will help. It's a very a good support. But as long as we're actually creating fast fashion and consuming fast fashion. It's not only using, it's consuming, especially in the textiles industry, because textiles are a very individual thing, and it shows emotions and feelings. I do understand that people would like to consume, but on the other hand, if we don't stop consuming that much, again, I mean, this is a platitude, but we don't have a planet B, and this is actually what Fridays for Future reminded us. And it's a pity that we need this reminder nowadays, but it's good on the other side as well. But my petitum is to not only ask for a law, but also change your own attitude towards things, towards consuming, towards people as well. And on the other hand, politics have to act. Absolutely, I do agree, I would undersign that. And businesses have to change their model. And one last point, we need the civil society. If there wouldn't have been this pressure, positive pressure from civil society's side, then I'd say I predict the law wouldn't be that far as we're discussing right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I mean, that's always...
it's a multi-stakeholder initiative, the world,
yeah,
so it's not that easy. Not one actor can change the whole world.
No, well, if you want to change a system, you need everybody to participate, and that's always clear. And I think the citizens, the consumers, they play like a multi-layered role in there. I think, I mean, the focus on them as consumers is a bit overly strong in the last few years, I feel. But I have hope that the role as a citizen is coming back also a bit more. I would like to kind of use the last few minutes to open up the round also to the audience, if there's questions. Just as a small comment, we kind of dropped a bit the global aspect in terms of the lawmaking, but I think we were quite fine on the national level, first of all, and maybe we continue this discussion in July and see if we got further in between, and then also talk more about the global perspective. But obviously a German law would influence also global supply chains. So is there questions in the audience? Or is this been such a fulfilling content already for you all?
They have to digest all the infos.
I knew there must be one hand at least. Just give me a second, I'll try to come closer.
Hi, I just have a question to Anosha. I didn't quite get it. When exactly do you plan to have the law? And also the EU thing, I really like that idea as well, because a lot of discussion is going on about if the German companies have like a negative impact on their business if they have this law, and what about the other ones? But we have some law in the UK, we have some in France, and definitely we should do that in on an EU level. But yeah, if there is a law in Germany coming, or do you have to first do it with the EU and then you have the law here? So I think it's going to be quite complicated. So when can we expect the law to come?
Yes, thank you for the question. As I said, we have the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, and it gives us sort of the road to a legislation. So far, we didn't finish the second survey, which will give us the results on the performance of German businesses in, when it comes to their due diligence. But so the German government, as such, didn't decide on the law, of the necessity of a law so far. but 2 ministries will come up in less than 1 month, my minister and the Minister of Social Affairs and Labor, with basic points for a law. Just to be prepared in case that the second survey will also be that frustrating as the last one, because 20% is far away from the 50% that the German government actually was setting up. So if we will have the same result in the second survey, then the German government, by mid of this year, will then decide on having a national legislation. It's binding. It's in the coalition agreement between the 2 parties, the main parties, so between the government, and so it will definitely come. And on EU level, it will look into if EU legislation is also possible. And we will use the momentum of the German EU presidency this year to also look deeper into that. It's actually a good alignment of the 2 processes, inshallah, if this goes as we are actually working on, because if we will have the results of the second survey, that will be in end of summer, end of June 2020, and our presidency will start at the 1st of July, so maybe it's a coincidence.
We will kickstart Neonit on the 1st of July, so we can reunite here again. I saw one more question, or...
Just a follow-up question, because we also have elections coming up next year, so I was just wondering if the second survey shows, okay, this is as frustrating as the first survey, and then it takes some time to decide on how what this law might look like, can elections, in case of a change of government, actually endanger the possibility for a law to come?
That's why we're actually working right now in order to avoid that, because you might think that you can procrastinate actually this process, but so that's why we're actually coming right now with thoughts on a law, to be prepared to sort of present a draft law as soon as the second results will be on the table.
So you're trying to get this done before 2021?
That's actually what we're looking to. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well,
That's also what we're trying to support with the campaign, to really increase the pressure that gets done.
I just can't imagine that. I mean, we've been talking about this for so long, that this draft, in order to become legislation, will only take a year until the next election. Do you understand?
Well, I guess if the process is on a certain stage, then it's very difficult to stop it again.
Plus, you have the commitment in the coalition agreement, and the coalition agreement knew that the surveys will come in 2020, the results of the survey. So the coalition must have known that, and a year is good enough to bring up. We had laws coming up in 6 weeks, so if there's a will, you will find the path. And if the results are that frustrating as like the first ones, I think there is no way out for any other ministry to not go that path.
I imagine it a little bit like building. I mean, if you look at here in Berlin, we still have a few building sites. Some of them work quite well, some not so well. But once you've laid out the foundation, sometimes it's crazy how quickly the rest goes. So it might take 2-3 years for that. And I guess here, I mean, this is what we're laying out the foundation here right now. And well, if some people are motivated, then maybe we get it very quickly. Right. I think
can I?
We can all of you can say one last thing, because this is kind of now our wrap-up round. I want to thank you already. I think this is a very important topic, and it's very interesting for the overall dynamic, how everything is changing now, and like change seems to be coming like action. I think that's the big question for 2020, actually, for many different fields. And yeah, that would also be a bit my wrap-up question for you. Like, okay. What do you expect if we come back together in like half a year? What should have been accomplished so that we can keep this wherever we want?
Yeah, I think everybody should be aware of the resistance by conservative parts in the government and the economic associations, and really look into it, really critical. And at the same time, I hope we have gained momentum by more and more companies like Folkdays, but also many other companies who are supportive of regulation for human rights, and also by many people who supported and who signed our petition.
How can we find your petition? Is that also still open, or how is this working between the two different ones now?
Yeah, we have to think how we join our signatories and our petitions.
We try to join forces, but the civil society process is a lot longer than if the Lisa impatient process. So it didn't happen in the end, but we got together early on because, of course, it makes sense to actually join forces here.
Yeah, and I just wanted to show this because this is how you can recognize the initiative. And it's simply called Lieferketten Gesetz.de, so it's easy to find.
Great.
And the Fair by Law video booth is in Halle. What's the hall name?
Hangar 4.
Hangar
so
4,
if you go out left into the
in
hangar.
the forum. We have everything set up, so please come by and become part of this video. And I am hopeful, certain that when we sit here in July, 1st of July, that we will have a law, at least a draft.
Let's keep that spirit up. What would be your last comment here?
Actually, I think that from half a year from now, in July, we will go a giant step towards more sustainability in global supply chains, and that will include legislation as well as other measures. My favorite word, smart mix. And my firm belief is that, it's not a belief, I hope very much that also consumers, and I include myself there as well, will change their attitude towards consuming a bit more and be sustainable as well. So it's really, as I said, the world is a multi-stakeholder initiative. Not one actor alone can change the many different issues that we have to struggle with and to tackle. So it's actually, it goes out to the audience as well. Challenge yourself on being sustainable.
Collaboration is a key between all kind of players, I would also say that. Thanks a lot. Lovely to have you. Come back in July. We'll work on that, I think, and hopefully have also a bit more to say about the global perspective, since we know already how the law is going to look like. Thanks a lot.